Good evening.
And welcome to Karl Marx Does the Washing Up.
I'm Shai Tully.
And I'm Ilyas Kassam.
And today we're going to talk about something that we haven't discussed yet, but we kind of touched on it a lot. But I think it's time that we actually discuss it properly. So my favourite book is Tender is the Night by Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite books anyway. It's had a big impact on my life.
Oh, wait. Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's a quote in the book about the principal character. He's like talking about another couple, and he says that he created his wife's world and allowed her a few liberties within it. So he created his wife's world and allowed her a few liberties within it. And so if we expand that and we say that God created this world, does he allow us few liberties within it? He or she or whatever you believe God to be, does God allow us few liberties within it? Or whoever the creator is, even if it is like some sort of science or whatever, are we living in a world in which we have few liberties?
Well,
so really it's a discussion about power.
Is it? Well, the first one is. The second one, I think, turns to freedom.
Yeah, but then, I mean, what is power? Like, power and freedom are, in essence, together, right? You can't have one without the other.
I don't know. I think they actually...
Yeah?
They can be very intertied, but they can be very different. I think freedom's really misunderstood.
Yeah? So, okay, fine. So should we talk about... So I don't really want to talk about the creating a wife's world, allowing her a few liberties within it. I think.
What was that? But that as an idea, like Fitzgerald saying that, is that intentionally he did so? Or is it a poetic, like, retrospection on what he's done?
Well, he's commenting on a couple, and so you don't know the ins and outs of that couple. So you don't know if he's intentionally created that world, or if it's looking at something with hindsight.
So it's not a relationship he's in?
No, it's not a relationship he's in.
Okay.
It's a commentary on another couple.
Okay. Interesting.
And I think a lot of relationships can be viewed in that vortex, actually.
Yeah.
Like within a power dynamic. But
also
if we expand it to the God dynamic,
Yeah,
God created a world in which we have few liberties in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, okay, so we'll take it to the God, but I think that...
Oh, you want to start at the initial... Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, like, forget the whole gender, like, constricting sort of thing, but the idea of actually having a monogamous relationship is imposing a limit on your life voluntarily. Right?
Yeah, and you're opposing that on your own life, right? It's not necessarily being imposed on it by someone else.
Or someone else. They're just the idea of the subscribing to that relationship.
Yeah.
Right? You're creating so many liberties. You're creating so many limits.
Yeah,
like
you're
so many
limiting your liberties, yeah.
Yeah, you're limiting your liberties. But why do we do it? Because within that sort of, those limits that keep getting, like, kind of defined and built in comes this, like, intimacy that provides a certain freedom, a freedom of being known, right?
Freedom of being... Yeah.
Yeah. A freedom of, like, being loved, a freedom for the self to become its most, like, open form. And that comes by imposing the restrictions or the care of another person, right? So I think if we apply that to the idea of, like, has God created, us without our, what did you say? Our restrictions. He created this world.
And allowed us few liberties within it.
And allowed us few liberties within it. The question is, like, to what degree is liberty important for freedom?
Okay.
Right? So, and I think the thing is that one way you can just say that, we are just so constricted by our anatomy, by the suffering of the universe, by our biology,
and
by
also
geography,
by space,
by all of this sort of
everything,
stuff.
right? Yeah.
Right? But, I mean, with the God debate, it's really hard because we don't know what the other opportunity is, right?
But in the monogamy debate, we do know what the other opportunities are.
To not be in that relationship.
Yeah, of course. But also, it's not always easy to come out of a relationship, right? Like, I think...
Yeah, but there seems like...
you won't make that decision.
But providing we acknowledge that free will exists,
okay.
then you can either be in... There's an ability to be in that relationship or not. And even if we don't have that ability, we know what it looks like to some degree. We don't know what a universe without the physical laws or constructs that we...
Yeah, okay, that's very
true.
In. Yeah, but that's what science fiction is, right?
Yeah.
It's creating
But there's never been a science fiction which has actually not had its own limits. Like, everything lives within a structure of restriction. There is no form without restriction.
Yeah, but do you think that's true? Like, is it impossible to have any form without restriction?
Well, a form comes about through a certain boundary of something, right?
So without a boundary, it's simply not a form. Like it just wouldn't exist, or it would exist, but we just wouldn't define it as existing.
Yeah, I guess.
So for something to exist, it has to be within the confines of a boundary.
I think so.
Like even God is kind of boundaried.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like we say the universe is a bounded concept, but if we think of the universe as infinite, it becomes unbounded but unknowable.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the same is God. The reason we struggle with God and why we put him into like, metaphorical forms is because the infinity of God is inconceivable.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right? So I think we need, like, there is no world that can exist in a material form without restriction.
Without restriction. Yeah, okay, fine.
But then the question is, like, why so fucking many? Right?
Yeah. Okay, fine. So if we focus on the initial thing, it's not just within relationships, though.
Yeah.
Like, even within friendships, we do create our friendships and now sometimes allow our friends few liberties within our friendships.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that comes out of fear, right? We don't give people liberties. Like a lot of monogamy, like, or relationships are like, we don't give people liberty because we have the fear that with the liberty they will leave us.
Is that what it is, though? So is it just a power thing?
Insecurity. Power from insecurity. It's not like genuine power. It's like fear. I think a genuine power comes from a freedom that exists within an acceptance of certain
liberties.
Certain constraints.
So how would you tell the difference between a genuine power and a power that's come from insecurity or fear? Like, do they not just look the same? And they act the same. They look the same. They act the same. So is there any difference, actually, between the power that's from the insecurity and the power that's from liberty?
I think, like, as an individual, you have to judge that on yourself and just be honest with yourself. Like,
yeah, but as an individual, I'm trying to rid myself of power. Like, I don't want to be in a relationship where I have power.
Yeah.
I want to exist in a world without a power dynamic.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's what love is, transcending the power dynamic.
Yeah. And I actually think we both agree with that. And obviously it's harder...
It's very difficult.
Yeah, and also even friendships, right? True friendships maybe when you do transcend that power dynamic.
Yeah.
But it's really hard because power's in such a state of flux.
Yeah. And you're always moving from these.
You're always moving, right?
Yeah, but so what you're saying...
What's the difference between the power from insecurity and the power from freedom?
Well, I mean, you mean how do we tell, or how does it manifest?
Yeah, how does it manifest, or how do we tell, or what does power from freedom look like to you?
Power from freedom?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, I think it's just, what it looks like. It's just an intuitive, you understand when somebody has a genuine power because it's comfortable. The genuine power is somebody who is in a state of comfort rather than anxiety.
What they don't need to state their power.
Like this person who's like screaming like a madman is not normally in a state of power.
He's
in a state of insecurity within the aesthetics of anger. That can allude to power, and they can be really productive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, normally most government prime ministers and stuff are in that state of insecurity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then, I think so. I don't know. And then, but then the power. I guess there's a kind of, I don't know. I feel like I always just reference some like archetype of a yogi, but there's like the guy who's just sitting in silence.
It's the archetype that you want to achieve, but you don't achieve.
No, of course not. Because I live in the world of insecurity.
Yeah, of course.
And I think we all do. I don't think like this totality of power really exists.
You don't think power exists?
I mean, like power exists, but I mean like this idea that we are this like really powerful, not governed by fear. It's crazy.
But then there is this idea that God is omnipotent, right, and omnipresent and all-powerful. Do you believe that to be true? Do you believe that's even possible that someone could be that powerful?
Yeah,
obviously not within the confines of our form.
Someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think something that has the sort of something that has the ability to give birth to everything that we have come into contact with and can conceive or consider is all powerful within our constructs of what power can be. Like, but we can't imagine a power beyond being able to do everything.
Yeah, okay, right? That's true. But then do you think God's power is born from insecurity?
I mean, that's interesting. Like, I mean, in the Greek mythology, there's actually a lot of that.
Because Zeus is kind of insecure, isn't he?
Yeah, they're all insecure gods trying to, like,
Yeah, but those gods are quite humanized, I think.
They are very humanized. But if we're talking about like the omnipresent, like an Islamic god or
Yeah.
Christian god, then I think, is God's power out of insecurity?
Yeah,
I mean,
out of
it's like an interesting thing to explore, but I don't think it's the case. Yeah, I think insecurity is an anthropomorphizing of God.
You think so?
Yeah.
Why?
I mean,
Like, it's interesting to explore, but
why? Like
we never explore it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's explore that. Maybe that's what the podcast is about. Like,
Yeah, we
is
never
God
really-
insecure? Does he need to go to therapy?
Yeah, but we never really explore. But maybe it's pointless to explore something that transcends us in the flaws of human nature, right? In the flaws of human personality.
That transcends us in the flaws of the human person.
Yeah, it's pointless applying our flaws to something that, you know, is considered to be above our flaws.
Yeah, it's not consistent with its form.
Yeah, exactly. It's not consistent with its form. Yeah. But okay, fine. Let's just talk about liberty and freedom, right? So you
Okay.
think liberty and freedom are different things.
Yeah.
So what's liberty?
Liberty is an ability to do what you want
When you want.
in a regard. Like total liberty is like that. But if we're
Does
talking
total
about
liberty exist?
well, like if we're talking about that's why freedom is not dependent on liberty. Because
So what is freedom?
okay, so I don't know. These are just my of course, like always, just like my wildly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yes, but,
it's just your inability to look in a dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think a freedom is really just a state of peace and wholeness in being, right?
A state of peace and wholeness in being. So I don't know anyone else that maybe looks at freedom in that same way.
Okay.
We maybe see freedom in like an ideological way, in that we're free, literally free from jail, or free from work, or free from something. Because you're saying freedom is just.
Well, the thing is, okay, it'll make more sense when I kind of describe it, because I think it's the same. I think it's the same definition as everybody else's.
Are you saying I should stop interrupting you?
I mean,
give you the freedom to speak.
No, I think you should speak more because I've been speaking most of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not making any sense. So you have to speak more to try and explain.
Yeah,
what you're
I
trying
haven't
to
said
say.
what I'm saying. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So what I think is, like, let's say liberty is the ability to do whatever you want in a certain regard, or in a total regard, whether we're calling total liberty or we're talking about liberty of the body.
Yeah, but what we're also saying is that we actually can't.
Yeah.
We can't, because we're limited by the bounds of like time and space.
Yeah.
And everything.
Everything.
Money, everything. Yeah.
So I think freedom could possibly exist if absolute liberty was possible. But considering absolute liberty
is impossible. Yeah.
Then we will never be free in like pushing liberties, right? Because we will never really be totally free. We'll always be coming up against some wall.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
And that wall could be.
Well, it could be not being able to take that much heroin. Like it can be whatever.
There is a limiting factor.
There is always a limiting factor. So the only way you can find any sort of genuine freedom is to accept
that there is liberties.
No limits.
Sorry, exactly. To accept that there's limits, right?
Accept your limits. So I think if you really genuinely know how to accept the existence of limits, then you can learn how to transcend the limits. So you begin to act within your limits, but live beyond them. And for me, that's freedom.
Bullshit. You're like just a motivational speaker. You're like, find out your limits, run your marathon in 4 hours, and then run it in 3 hours and a half. No, find your limit and then transcend that limit.
That's completely the opposite of what I'm saying.
No, you're saying find your limit and then transcend that limit.
No, not break your limit. I'm not breaking the limit. I'm saying transcend your limit by accepting your limit, living a limited life.
Oh, so you're saying instead of rallying against my limit, I just live within it?
Yeah, you live within it.
But you're a terrible motivational speaker.
Yeah.
No, that's like... No,
I'm completely unmotivated.
Yeah, completely.
Completely unmotivated.
No, but I really like that. Like,
my first criticism is that I'm a motivational speaker. The next one is that I'm a useless one.
Yeah, if you're going to be a motivational speaker,
I'm not. We're a nonsense podcast.
No, we're a motivational podcast.
Okay, but yeah.
But more importantly, so whenever I try and live within my limits, I'm not a big fan of fucking roller coasters, and yet everyone's like, you should go and ride that roller coaster. But I'm very happy living in my roller coaster free life.
Yeah.
Like, I think as a society, we've been taught to push against our limits.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is the opposite, that true freedom is just accepting your limit and then living within it.
Yeah. No, living beyond it, but acting within it.
Living beyond it, but acting within it. So what does living beyond it mean?
That you're...
I'm limited by time. So how do I live beyond time, but still within time?
Because you don't define your internal architecture by the aesthetic limits of your life. Because if you become...
Yeah, but that's a beautiful sentence, but what does that even mean? What does that actually mean?
Because if you learn to love your limits, if you learn to accept your limits and really engage with them in a way, you're no longer impinged by them.
Yeah, okay, but that does resonate. But I think in real world practice, I think it's impossible to apply.
So it's really difficult. But I came to this because I spent a lot of time. I didn't totally get there, but I've spent a lot of time during my sickness when I was hugely limited. Like all the limits that were taken away from me, all the things that I used to be able to do.
Yeah, they were now limited, right?
Yeah. So my world became so much smaller. It was like for a lot of the time it was just a room.
So sickness is a way that you can test this, right? Like you used to live one way, but now you need to live another way because you're limited. But you still live beyond your limits. How?
You live beyond your limits because. So let's take the basic limit is the body.
Yeah.
Right? So we're limited by our skin.
Yeah.
Right. So really, we can't. You can't fly. You can't do all the things that the skin bag weighs you down so much.
The skin bag.
That's what we are. We're just skin bags. We're just floating skin bags, right?
The terminology doesn't really matter, but the point, we can't fly, right? Like that may, of course. Okay.
So we can't fly.
Yes.
And then, okay, how do it's kind of this idea that using the body, right, fixating on the limits to the point that the limits themselves begin to dissolve. Because if you look at the limit, I think the basis of this theory, which I haven't explained very well, is that basically every boundary is not fixed; it's permeable.
So every boundary is fluid.
It's fluid. It's fluid. It's permeable. So it means you can actually there's a space to live beyond it. Like there is, if you look at the body, if you look at the skin and the body and the space around it, the space actually moves through your skin. When you generally consider, when you normally, the way we normally live our lives is that we are this body suspended within space, moving around. And when we move somewhere, the space moves out of the way. But it's not really what happens. We move through space, right? Space moves through us, right?
Okay, so how do you overcome the limitations of your body?
So there's no real limit there, right? If you think about it, there's no real limit because the body is part of its environment. Your body is in very quantum sort of way the length of the universe, right?
No, but I agree with that, right?
Your extension is there.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can't fly, right?
Right.
But if you accept that sort of that permeability of the skin, and yet you are still a skin, and you engage with that, then you start beginning to your being begins to live beyond its skin.
No, I think, okay, that does resonate. And in the same way that, if you're sick and you're confined to a room, there is a way that you can still escape that room.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's not through your imagination.
No, it's through actual...
It's through connecting to the environment to a degree that no longer does that limit belong to you because you are not an individual thing trapped within a box, right? As long as you consider yourself as an individual trapped within a box, you'll always be looking for a bigger box. And that's what doing drugs is. That's what skydiving
is. But you're saying that you're an individual trapped within the biggest possible box because you're part of the universe.
You're in a permeable box, so you got to act. You got to play the game within it. But if you play that game and accept the box, you just meditate on the box. And then you realize that the box is actually permeable and you can just float outside it.
No, I like that. That does That does definitely resonate. I don't know. I don't
know if I'm making any sense.
I don't think you're making any sense. But I mean,
But I
definitely
think-
it sounds nice.
So a good answer is like if you're lying, if you're
A
buying
good answer.
a good
So
answer.
everything right now.
not a good answer. A decent enough bad explanation of what I was saying is like, or metaphor is like, if you're staying, you find yourself in nature and you
Yeah.
have this deep sense of serenity that comes about you, and you feel like you belong to the rest of the world in that moment,
Yeah.
which I think we've all kind of felt.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, it feels so bodily. It feels so physical. It feels so like part of the
and grounded, right?
Yeah, but also so infinite, right? So if you can apply that sort of degree of like you're living, that's a very like bodily
okay.
experience of which essentially gives you a freedom, a total freedom
Yeah.
of living outside of your body. Even though you haven't left your body, you're still a living body.
So maybe I thought there was more permanence in this sort of state of being, but what you're saying is actually it's quite transient, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't live in this state constantly. Like you don't go beyond your limits constantly. It's only fleeting moments. Or you're saying that there may be a way to do this permanently.
Well, I think you can do it permanently, but just using this mechanism in order to like navigate a lot of life is useful. But there's also something to be said that a certain degree of liberty is important, because you always finding a bigger box is not the solution, but you need a decent enough size box. So if you're like in this tiny squashed box, right?
You should probably try and find a bigger box.
Yeah, and we should help other people find those bigger boxes. So the big.
Is this a conversation about equality?
Yeah, pretty much. So
exactly.
but the small box is like, the box that we're talking about is like there should be food and shelter, the basic survival stuff.
Yeah.
And we should treat our bodies like.
Oh yeah. So what we all. I mean, I think the caveat is always that we can only have these experiences if the basic needs are taken care of.
But I mean, a lot of the kind of ascetics have actually used fasting and all those kind of techniques to actually transcend themselves. So it's possible to say that actually
you don't need basic needs to
maybe the basic needs even inhibit this. But I think this is where I learned the capacity, and I've forgotten it. I also don't.
I can tell you've forgotten it because you're not making any.
Not making any sense. But I've forgotten it on an intellectual level, but I've also forgotten it on a visceral level.
Really?
But
is it something that can't be defined, or was there a point when you could define it?
Yeah, I think there was a point I could define it, because I worked very hard on
Trying to define it.
Yeah, and like working out theories and stuff of life.
Yeah.
Now I've just given up on it all and just ramble.
We've got a podcast.
Podcast, yeah. Perfect time for that. Yeah. But I really did find, but not really out of necessity, I was trapped in a lot of stuff, and how do I find my freedom? And I managed to find a freedom which was so surprising to me, that I managed to find this freedom that I'd never experienced. I had a freedom in my sickness that is greater than any freedom I've ever experienced.
But did that freedom cure you? Like, is that what you attribute to the cure? Is that the point?
It cured me. The thing is, I didn't attain a total freedom. I attained freedom in moments.
So it wasn't consistent.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't.
It was transient.
It was transient. I still came face to face with the
sickness.
Yeah, and also the fact that I just wanted the liberties. I wanted the liberties that I was not given.
So I think that's really fascinating, because illness often defines our identity. Sickness often defines our identity. But what you're really saying, it's not the sickness in itself. It's just the fact that more liberties are taken away from you. And that's what defines our identity.
What defines our identity? Yeah.
Is the amount of liberties that we have.
The amount of liberties that we have.
Like in that book, that woman was defined as somebody's wife, because that's the only liberty that was afforded to her. So what you're really saying is the way that we define each other is just by the liberties that are available to us.
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's... No, I don't think that's true. I think we define...
You don't think that's true?
Well, I think... Okay, maybe that's what we're doing, and what I'm saying is we can define ourselves by how we relate to our liberties. Limits. Essentially what I'm saying, which is maybe a very convoluted way of saying it, but changing the way in which...
You've got to make the podcast last 21 minutes, so you're like, let me just
ramble nonsense. But it's basically just changing the relationship to our limits rather than changing the limits themselves.
Yeah, but it was also, I mean, like, so much of it is just acknowledging your limits.
Yeah.
How much time do we actually spend acknowledging our limits?
Yeah, not much.
Like, so much
and most
time
motivational speakers, or most everybody's like, you can do the impossible, everything's fine. Like,
impossible is nothing,
yeah.
right?
And I'm
but
just
actually,
saying,
what
no,
you're saying,
motherfucker, you're not.
what you're saying is that impossible is actually very real, and you need to acknowledge that, but you can still live beyond that in some times.
Yeah, I think the idea of...
Wait, so are you a motivational speaker? Yes or no? No.
I don't live within the limits of being a motivational speaker. I act beyond them.
Okay, now that we've cleared that up. Yeah.
No, I cleared that up.
Okay, fine. So, fine. If we take it to a very real problem, what is the limit of our podcast and how do we live beyond that? So the limits of our podcast are that, it's 21 minutes. And we, ignore that every single time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, in your theory, we are kind of recognizing our limits, pushing beyond that, but also still living within it.
We're not really living within it at all. Right? We're just pushing beyond it. I don't think this is a good
so to create a good
of what
podcast,
I'm talking about. Okay?
So to create a good podcast, we need to live within the 21-minute time limit.
Maybe.
But occasionally do 21 minutes and 20 seconds or something.
Maybe that's the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, but in this
but
podcast is already 25
having said that,
minutes.
most of my life is like I've just been taking use of my liberties, right? Recently. So I think the challenge for me in terms of this is all like a bit, maybe it's too autobiographical to actually be useful.
But that's really fascinating because so much of life advice is autobiographical. And we do try and apply our understanding of situations we've been through to other people's situations, right?
Yeah. But that's
almost all life advice is
No, but sometimes
autobiographical.
that's amazing because it creates a kind of universal resonance through the particular, but the other time it's just projection.
So is this just you projecting?
Yeah, I think it could be both. But
Could be both.
mostly the projection.
It's mostly just a projection.
Most things are.
Sorry, what does this have to do with...
okay.
What does this have to do with the initial question that I asked?
What was the question?
I can't even remember.
Was it like, what should we have for dinner? So it's always that. That's the only question you ever ask.
Yeah,
really.
because my main limit is hunger.
Yeah. So I think that's something that's good. We need to... So a good example is like, sometimes when I feel like I get caught up in the world of like shiny things.
Yeah.
I'll just take,
Something
eat...
that's not that shiny.
Huh? No, I'll just
really?
eat rice. I'll just eat rice for a week. Like that's all I'll eat for rice. Okay, fine, I get constipation, but I start to understand the taste of food way better, and so I begin to gain a sense of like joy and freedom within food as a whole. Thing.
I really like that.
And I think that's essentially what I'm talking about. Is if you begin to. And I think that's why people fast and stuff.
Yeah, because they want that enjoyment back in food.
Yeah, kind of. But like to just appreciate things for what they really are, or the essential quality of things.
I suppose if you live in a world where everything is given to you, how do you ever appreciate it? You've got to take it away for you to be able to appreciate it.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, that's quite cliche.
I think that's a different... I mean, yeah, but cliche is fine.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't know why you're so against cliche. We're like...
Well,
I feel like I'm more... Yeah, huh?
They're my limits.
Your cliche is your limit.
Yeah, exactly,
okay.
yeah.
I'm limited by cliche.
Yeah.
I only say avant-garde statements.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know how to navigate this.
Well, I mean, this is a good self-awareness podcast. Very
Self-awareness?
Yeah, because you're very self-aware.
Yeah, but what about you? Tell me some stories. So what are your ideas? So what do you think about this freedom nonsense?
I don't think freedom exists in the way that you think it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying does resonate, but I think in practice, I don't think it's my interpretation of freedom. And I think liberties, like you said, I don't think you need to live in a world of absolute liberties for you to experience freedom.
Yeah. So I think that's more the most important thing is that actually that concision. But no, I think the thing is
lucky I've been listening to this rambling and able to sort out what's going on.
Because I think liberty is important for freedom, but it's just not everything. And
it's not everything.
Point,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And it's about learning how to relate to your limits as much as it is learning to defy them.
I think that's a good takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not to fall in that obsession of trying to defy your limits.
Yeah. Which our society is really governed by.
Yeah, but
right?
we kind of need to live within our limits.
Yeah. And I think a lot of religious institutions, like I've spoken about it in a weird way, but a lot of religious institutions and a lot of old philosophies really do have an understanding of this. Maybe they don't speak about it
in those terms,
or like, but their rituals and everything that is worked on, especially like from like a collectivist perspective, really values this. The idea of a community is a freedom that is offered through a restriction. The idea of marriage is a freedom that is offered through a restriction.
Yeah.
The idea of religion, of prayer, is a freedom offered through a restriction. All of these things, or most of religious capacity, is essentially that. It's like, why? And I think when people are like, but spirituality without the religion we should just throw away. And when I say, like, I think we're throwing the baby with the bathwater, it is actually that we don't value the intangible aspects of a restriction. And its relationship to freedom.
I think that's a really beautiful sentiment to end on, actually. I really like that. Because we don't see freedoms through restrictions.
No.
We don't see them as a good thing. Like, a lot of anti-marriage sentiment is that it's a restriction. Or a lot of anti-religion sentiment is that it's restricting. But we don't see the freedom that it's offering within those restrictions.
Yeah.
No, I really like that. I think it definitely needs more exploration.
I think there's an honesty that comes with a restriction, because you come face to face with the fact that you're just a fucking skin bag.
Yeah, skin bag.
Skin
bag. Is this terminology you're coining?
Yeah. No, I've heard the, I've heard bags of skin like before. This is skin bag. No, but like the reality of like we're just like these beings like suffering. Like you said, God created us as restricted. That's what we are. We're just restricted beings living restrictedly.
Yeah, but then also in my theory, we created God. In my previous theory, we created God with also restriction.
Yeah, but it's maybe not clear in this podcast. But if you listen to the other ones, it's clear that you're an idiot. Like that's the main.
No,
thesis.
you're the idiot in this podcast.
Yeah, I'm the idiot. I'm the idiot in this podcast. But
yeah, normally it's me.
Well, I think we both have a healthy dose of idiocy. But like the thing is that we can both live within our restriction of our intelligence.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So we can still have fun in a podcast, knowing that we're saying nothing, and the majority of what we're saying is stupid. But it can still be like fruitful and freeing.
Yeah, so maybe we do live beyond the limits in this podcast. Actually,
yeah, we definitely live beyond our intelligence.
Yeah, fine. We'll end it on that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.